Hello and welcome to the Leadership Forum at Silver Bay podcast. For 101 years, business, organizational, community, educational, and citizen leaders have met on the shores of Lake George to address the most pressing human and leadership issues of their times. These leaders have come to the Leadership Forum to understand, shape, and deepen the skills required to lead in an increasingly complex and changing world. Economic, social, and political challenges around the globe continue to underscore one essential truth: leadership matters. If you'd like to learn more about the Leadership Forum, please go to www.leadershipforumatsilverbay.com. My name is Rob Salafia. I'm the founder and CEO of Protagonist Consulting Group, as well as a lecturer at MIT Sloan School of Business and an MIT Leadership Center Master Executive Coach, and your host for the Leadership Forum at Silver Bay podcast. I'm joined today by John Harvey. John is a kind soul and a force of nature. He's been an attendee and beneficiary of the Leadership Forum for 30 years and now serves as one of its elder guides. He's the president, owner, and head catalyst of T2Partners Consulting, whose motto is improving the world one leader at a time. John, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Rob. This is very exciting.
Let me ask you a question. Improving the world one leader at a time. Could you help me and the people listening exactly what do you mean by that, and how do you do that?
Yeah, I'll try to really be brief because it's taken me 64 years today to get there. And, I've since 9/11, I had been a corporate guy. I had been the head of global talent at American Express, and 9/11 was a pretty, interesting day for me and impactful day for me. But I'd say the last 17 years, it's led me to really think more about purpose and what that means and how I bring that into my life. And so, improving the world one leader at a time is the point I arrived at about 2 years ago when I was really thinking about purpose in this next chapter and probably the capstone chapter in my life and what I'd want it to be known for. So if you boil it down, basically the work that I do is around coaching individuals or working with teams around accelerating high performance. And we believe that if we can develop personal leaders, which is different from managers and as individuals, it's not organizational people or people that manage people, but if we can be really effective at helping each person develop as a personal leader, either individually or on a team, we know that will accelerate high performance. And being that we talk about leadership specifically, we know as leaders develop, it fulfills, all of their actions and behaviors, or drives all of their actions and behaviors. And ultimately, that's going to improve the world. They're going to be better spouses, they're going to be better employees, better neighbors, better whatever. And so that's how we connect the two together.
Beautiful. You mentioned something. You mentioned something about the difference between managing and leading. Help us understand that. How do you see the difference there?
Yeah, it's a really important distinction for me as I've been in my corporate days and since and in life. And I think it's one of the ills of the world today is that we use terms like leadership without really defining what it is. And, whether it's the leader of the free world or whatever, we put that term out there pretty randomly. And I think it disparages all those people that are great leaders in the world. So first of all, this management, which I think we all understand, and this is our ability to influence and drive the performance of a group of people. I'd say it's more about the mechanics and motivation and things like that, goal setting. And then we go to personal leadership, and this is the individual. And we use a very basic definition, which we adopted from another community member, Mike Morrison, which is, personal leaders are people that are committed to creating meaningful change in the world. And meaningful change has three characteristics. It's purposeful, it's proactive, and it's positive. And so that's the individual, and that's how we work with each person on a team, is to help them develop as good personal leaders or effective personal leaders. And then we go to the next level, which is cultural leadership. And now this is the leadership that would most common in the work that most of us do in business is now I lead people, I lead others, and
Mm.
it's different from managing. It's inspiring versus commanding. It's asking versus telling. It's energy versus time. It's all these other factors that help us get the most out of people without them having to work harder or run harder.
No, I really love that distinction. Uh, and I think it's important when people say leadership, a lot of times they're thinking, oh, a position in an organization. And it really isn't. I've always looked at leadership as an act of leadership. It's an action, it's a behavior, it's how you show up.
Yeah, great point, and I'm 100% with you. And I would even go a little further, Rob. And what I say is that when we work at developing individual leaders, personal leaders, is the starting point is what are your values? What are the values that are most important to you in life? And leadership, by the way, personal leadership transcends life and work, right? And I always say, if you set out to be a good leader in life, you'll have a good work life. If you set out to be a leader at work, you'll have a good work life. And I think most of us are in this to have a great life where work complements that. And so what we find with the leadership work that we do is the more we can emphasize. Hey, Rob, you're not going to believe this. I just totally lost my line of thought.
No, here. I want to go back to core values. And I think that's a great foundation. So let me ask you, what do you believe in? What is your foundation that you grow and that your leadership grows from?
Yeah. No, yeah, I appreciate that. You brought me right back to the thought. So let me put that in context. So thank you. As I get a little bit older, this is harder.
Well, this is the fourth chapter of your life, John. So
so what I was saying about personal leadership is that, the way we look at the development model for personal leaders is start with your values, find the 5 things that are most important to you in life. And then every day just say, how am I doing? And you mentioned moments of leadership. What we talk about is the alignment between the values and everything you do. So if you're a leader of people, it's what are those values? What are the competencies at the next level that you need to be really good? So it's not just moments and actions. It's how you see things, how you believe things, and how things work. And we absolutely believe that continuum inside out, if you know Simon Sinek, as to why, how, what, is the best development model for personal leaders. So you asked about my values. I mean, it's interesting because I started this values work for myself right after 9/11, and it evolves, right? And today it's a couple of things. One, it used to be family. I've got 4 kids. I've got a grandson. I've got a terrific wife. And but my analogy for family when my kids were younger was pizza night on Friday night. And then my kids got older, and I realized nobody was showing up for pizza night. So family went to be relationships, and the more I can develop mutual relationships with my kids and other people that benefit both of us, the more energized I'm going to be. So that's certainly one of them. It's really, really important to me. Secondly is spirit, which I define as energy, and being a good source of energy, and being in situations where you gain energy. It has to be mutual energy. So even in my work, if I've got a team that's energized by the work, I mean, in many cases, the money's not important. It's just the energy I get back from that experience that's so important. And then the third one right now is fun. I'm an ex-rugby player, and we have a term called old boy, and I'm an old boy, and can't have fun doing what we're doing. I mean, I have a daughter that's a cardiac pediatric ICU nurse that's saving kids' lives every day, and they make it fun for the kids, dealing with cancer and other situations. And so if they can make it fun, that when they're dealing with near-death situations and kids that might be terminally ill, my goal is to make it fun in everything I do, because nothing I do is as important as that.
What impresses me right now is I hear the values have changed over time. One of my favorite exercises I ever did in business school was when I looked at my values, and I would say, let's put it in context of career values. I looked at them 10 years ago, and then at that time, in the current moment, and then what I thought that in 10 years are emerging values, what they would be. And I was astounded at how much they changed prior to what the present moment. And that's something that they evolve. And that's something that you mentioned in this. And I think that's something that's important for everyone to be able to look at how their values change over time. And sometimes it's just a refinement. That was really impressive.
And I think why, yeah, it's a great observation, and I think why they change, right? So what I've learned in doing my own work with values is there's a couple of things can change them. One is constant reflection, and I look at my values every day and say, what's energizing? Am I honoring it? Is a better way to put it. And when my energy's down a bit, and I go back to my values. And when I find when I'm honoring all of those values, things are good. And for me, often it might be calling one of my kids who live all over the place. And it's very selfish, but I know they get value from it, and it refuels my energy in that situation. This life situations that resonate with values. I mentioned, family relationships. My little one was about 16 out of 4. She was very independent. And she was doing her own thing. And that's when I started really thinking about it. I felt a little frustrated, frankly, and a little down about this family notion I had and how it was changing. But it was much healthier to accept that change going forward. And I'd say the third example I'd give you is my daughter, has a grandson, Archie. And, I said to her before he was born, and I said, as soon as Archie's comes out, as soon as he becomes real, you're going to look at the world completely differently. And I think that's a great time to examine these values and see what's more important to us now. So I look at it as more of a compass. I got to keep resetting the compass points for my life. Right. And if I'm honoring those every day and keeping them fresh and relevant and stuff, I think that's a good life, and that's an energized life.
So what I'm noticing right now is you're not separating work and family and your life. You're combining both of these. Tell me more about that in terms of like how you see your life impact your role in leadership and how leadership impacts your role in life.
Yeah, it's a great question. I think it's a dilemma of the work world and the world in general today, and especially for young people like my daughter that having their kids. And I do a lot of individual, what we call application coaching towards achieving business outcomes, and a lot of group work. And it's all about accelerating individual and team performance, right, and sustaining it. So the work issue is, let me take it from the problem back to the solution, I think. And so many times I hear from people, work-life balance and how difficult it is. And these two different worlds, and we typically measure it on time, rather than what I think it should be, which is energy. And if you look at the word balance, it connotates that there's equal. And being that we use time as our commodity, that means I'm going to spend equal time. And I think built into that is the reality that we're going to be disenchanted all the time. And so when I work with people, and again, a lot of people struggle with this, we talk about work-life rhythm. And so if I look at my values, and my family is my number one value, and I ask myself, how am I doing? I know I'm going to have a better life. And I hate to say it, but this conference is about failures. One of my regrets in life is when my kids were young, too often they got the short end of the stick because of work. And I said family was the most important thing, but yet work would always trump family situations, not the important situations, but even just being in the moment with them. And so I think that's an integrity issue. If I say family is the most important thing, and I promise my family that it's all about them, but yet they become second fiddle, I think that's an integrity issue. And it's something I've learned over life as you go through that. So the starting point, as I mentioned, for personal leadership and values have nothing to do with work. Values, I mentioned fun, and I mentioned relationships, and I mentioned spirit. And so when you start with values, it's not about work. It's what do you want the most out of this life? And we all have fixed lives. We all know people that have died before their time. So what if it ended today? Right? Mm-hmm. And how do we sort of create this focus so that every day we're bringing these values to light? And I think if you do that, what happens is things get in the right order. And you might even find the job's the wrong job, or your boss is the wrong boss for you, based on when you revisit those values that are most important to you. And as I look back at my career, I can't tell you how the misalignment of values, even in my last job at American Express with the woman I worked for, and what I knew was important to me, it was a complete misalignment. And the result was tension and anxiety, and frankly, not fulfilling what I wanted to do as a person, because I thought it was as important to honor the work situation.
John, you bring up a couple of really great points that I think everyone, if they could consider this, could have a lot of impact on their lives. You talked about taking the time for reflection. You talked about taking the time to reflect on values. You made an excellent distinction on work-life balance of being about not time but energy. I just really like that, and that that there's life rhythm that you have to get into, and energy is so important. Now, when someone gets into a work situation and they're reflecting on this, and all of a sudden they find out, oh my God, I'm really not in the right place. Yet there's a fear, right? There's a fear of like, how can I leave this? How can I mean, this is a risk situation. Someone has to assess the risk of stepping out into something new for fear of failure. How would you help somebody like that is knows they're not in the right place, yet they have a lot of responsibilities happening that month?
Right. It's a great question, and I mentioned catalyst, or you mentioned catalyst. Is what I believe a catalyst is people that are really good at helping people understand where they are, where they need to go, where they want to go, and then finding the motivation to change. And I think that's the most important thing. And a lot of times people tell you that you have to hit bottom to be willing to change. And changing behavior, I learned, is the most important thing to do in life, especially if you're successful on the surface. Right? So I think the first thing is really to acknowledge and understand what the challenge is. And again, I went back to that situation with my last boss in the corporate world. And for probably a year, it was just this period of tension, period of anxiety, period of never feeling successful. Right. And I thought it was all about me, and I wasn't succeeding enough. And it was a very frustrating time. Once I got to understanding, and this wasn't until after the fact, by the way, that we were misaligned on values, there's different things. So you could call that failure, and there's things I would have done differently. And I think we tried to do. One is that I would have gotten grounded in my own failures, and I would have drawn some boundaries. So, if it was about not getting back to my family, not spending enough time, I would have fought for that. So we talk about fight, flee, or freeze. I would have absolutely fought for that. And I think I froze too often in those situations. And then I think it's continuing to get crystallized around those values, and not just what they are, but what they mean, and that they really are about making promises to people that are important in our life. And so I think you have to go back and examine it and really think about it. I often, whether you're a personal leader or you're a cultural leader, I think one of the most important things we have to do is pause. The world is making us move too quickly. And if you could just pause 5 minutes a day and say, what matters and how am I doing against it? Or put those values up and say, okay, these are the 5 things most important. Let me create a focus in the morning, post it on a computer type stuff. And at the end of the day, say, how did I do? And what's going to happen, and this is interesting, what I learned is that it's going to create probably more friction. Because as your values get clearer to you and what's important to you, you're probably going to find more friction with the work world in particular, but the world in general. And so I think you really have to go back and examine it. And I think get grounded on those values and draw your own boundaries so that you're not, if you're working 70 hours a week and not seeing your kids and you died tomorrow, is that really what you want out of work or life?
It's what our these choice points in our lives often turn around values, don't they? If we were to look back.
Well, and not only that, but they should be, right? They should be.
Yep.
It's not that they should. I think we have to activate and make the choice points about the values, right?
Yeah.
And I bought a fish market, if you want to talk about failures, right after I left, about a year after I left American Express, and it was a failure, right? And what I've learned since then it was not a values-based decision. It was about, in my mind, running from something rather than running to something. And
I
if you
love
have
it.
clear values, you're always motivated to run to something, right? And so what happened is I got into this situation. I still needed to provide a living for my family after leaving a corporate senior management job. And I failed miserably, right? And I struggled, including on the ground deep depression in 2005, which is hitting bottom, right? And I know why now, and I understand it, but it included that. And so, as you go through failure, I think resiliency, I think optimism, I think getting back to the values, what's important in life, are some of the most important things you can do.
So I just love this, and I think this is very meaningful for anyone to listen to this because you're getting reminded. We always have to be reminded about what is important and create meaning for ourselves in order to create meaning for others as well. Uh, let's
Yeah.
come back to the Leadership Forum. You've been going to the Leadership Forum now for 30 years. Uh,
Yeah.
what has the Leadership Forum meant to you, or what role has it played in your life?
I would say, as far as my leadership development and professional development, and certainly even some personal development with family, because it's very family oriented. My kids have come. I've had a teen daughter come and participate. But it has been the one common thread throughout my life. And I first got invited when I was a manager, my first HR job, and it was almost like this secret society that I got invited to. You sort of couldn't talk about it. Not everybody was invited, right? And but as I go through stages of my life, I mean, if you look at my time at American Express, I mean, I had opportunities to bring my entire team up there and do what we called learning circles. And I had I had 400 people working for me, but there were 15 people that were able to make it. And some of those people are part of the community today and still talk about that as being one of the amazing development opportunities in life for me too. I mentioned, my depression in 2005, and I did a morning reflection about where I was at, which was a very, very dark place in my life. And as I turned to move off of we don't even have a stage, as you know, it's old 100-year-old buildings. But as I moved from the center of the room, the first person I saw was Mike Morrison. And there isn't a better person you can go when you hit bottom and talk to than Mike Morrison. Most of the connections in my professional career and network, which has expanded dramatically, are people from the Leadership Forum community. And when I say community, there's two things you want in life. One is a sense of belonging, that's community, and the other is some joy. And they have absolutely given me that. I've brought people from some of the work I do in Africa that even got to see an ocean for the first time. Leadership Forum was an amazing place for them. A couple of years ago, we brought up a bunch of young leaders, very diverse group, and because we thought we were aging too quickly and not staying fresh. And this group really helped us understand, purpose and mission and what we need to be in the future. And so I say this as if it's outside myself, but I can't tell you how much all of those experiences influenced me in my development as both a person and as a leader. So it's been 101 years, which to me is amazing. It started, as you know, back in 1918 with the Henry Fords and J.P. Morgan type people when they were trying to deal with how do we deal with labor unions as we move into the area of industrial work, and now we got the same challenges that they had 100 years ago. So it's an amazing, I'd call it a community. It's hard to call it anything more specific than that, like a conference, but it is a community, and it does provide a sense of belonging and certainly a lot of joy. And it's been a huge enabler of my success over my life.
Well, there's something that I've gone 2 years. This will be my third year. Last year, I know that I had a conflict come in, and I could only attend the last morning, and I drove from Boston. It was so important to me to come that I drove the Friday evening from Boston all the way up to Lake George, and it was well worth the trip. It was amazing because I didn't want to have that, have a gap in that experience.
Well, and It's a great point, Rob, because full disclosure, I've been going for over 30 years. I've not gone every year. I mean, I think the most I missed was 2 years in a row. But the one thing I can tell you is that the sense of belonging was so strong that you could always go back. And it isn't a tangible thing. It's not just the conference. It's this intangible sense of belonging that you get, and you can always go back, and you're always a part of it, whether you're there or not. And I think that's what makes it pretty special. Hey, Rob, if I could just make a comment, this year is a lot. I've been thinking a lot about failure, and especially as I go through this, into what I call it the fourth quarter of my football life, because in football you get some overtimes, and I'd love to have some overtimes. But as I reflected and over the past couple of years, as I define this next chapter, this idea of failure and the fact that Donna and her team have come up with this has really resonated with me. The first thing I've learned, is you have to accept you're going to fail, right? But the world, especially the work world, doesn't accept failure as an option. We're all driving for perfection, and I'm a guy that has learned for a long time that roughly right is a much better rival point than perfection. But the first thing I learned is we're going to fail, And I was listening to this terrific 2.5-minute audio by Nora McInerney, who's had some amazing personal tragedies, and she did 2.5 minutes on failure and the importance of failure. And I learned so much from that. And the fact that, it's not about being the best in life. It's about being the most improved was one thing she shared. The other thing I took away, and these are little snippets that were meaningful to me, is that if you fail more, you'll struggle less, and then the one that I've had, a quote I followed around with me or took around with me for a long time, is that the integrity of mistakes is the learning. And so, the world more and more, and it's getting faster and faster, and I think it's getting more unpredictable and riskier, but we still have that sense that we have to be perfect, And what Nora and her 2.5 minutes shared with me is that it's unachievable, and it's if you're going to live a life thinking that you're going to be perfect, and that you're not going to be mistakes, I think you're bound to be disappointed and disenchanted with life. So, I talked about the fish market, and I've learned so much from that experience. Even though it was painful in many different ways for my family, I would never choose to do it over again. And people that know me know that.
There's something you talk about with failure is, as you know, I started out the first half of my career as a performing artist, and I did a lot of street performing. I was actually in the Boston area, and I had the good fortune of being able to fail continually and try it again. And for some reason, I stayed in that. And having a platform for failure, you start to learn, if you start to get smart, you either leave it or you get better at it. And that's what.
And I would change what you said. I would say is you get used to learning, not failing.
Yes.
And you looked at it that way. And a lot of people know the book Tipping Point, Malcolm Gladwell. And one of the examples he talks about in there is the Beatles. And one of the reasons they were the greatest band of all time was in their teens, they actually had an offer to play in the Topless Bar in Berlin. And this is probably in the late 50s, right? And they had to play 8 hours a day because the Topless Bar owner realized that when he had music, more people came in. They heard it. It wasn't just a sense of seeing or whatever, but you also could hear this. And when they went back, or when Malcolm went back and looked at this, they roughly had spent 10,000 hours playing in the strip club, summers in Germany for several years. And so you could look at, they didn't look at it as failing. Like what they said, and don't quote me here, but basically what they said is the fact that we had to ad lib, the fact that we had to try things, and so many of didn't work, but we had the forum where it wasn't failure. We had the forum, and we didn't know it at the time, where it was continuing to be most improved. And they became obviously, the greatest rock and roll band of all time. And so I don't think those were moments of failure for them. I think they were moments of learning. Right?
Yes.
And even though probably they said we had to try every musical technique that we could do to write songs and keep people entertained for 8 hours a day. And I think it was 5 or 6 days a week.
You're going to develop some chops. So that's what I love about the arts is because you want to be there. It's a choice. And so you do
Yeah.
whatever you can to learn the ropes in order to get better. And it's a continual improvement process. Um, what can a leader like how does a leader set up the environment that allows people to fail? I mean, that business is serious, right? It's like this is not about failure. This is about we have to succeed.
Yeah, I think the first is to really recognize and acknowledge what leadership is, right? And in our work, we use a statement that's really important, which especially in today's world is true, which is that our leadership capabilities will always lag behind the next challenge, right? And so if the world's changing more and we're expected to do more and there's more unknowns, I mean, the world's changing at such an incredible pace, right? So, and leadership means being a little ahead of the curve. Management is maintenance, keeping it going. Leadership is ahead of the curve. So, if we're willing to play in an area that creates more ambiguity, and we can move people along and not have the master plan, but learn along the way, that's the first step. Is realizing that that is leadership. Playing in with the same boundaries all the time is not leadership. And so, I think it's our own development and realizing that we can control what we can control. Right. So that I think is the first step. And then the second step, and we get into this in our cultural leadership, and we think there's three aspects of this. One is around leadership, as I just described to you, and this is all about purpose. Secondly is about accountability, right? And we, go right to creating accountability. And I always say, as a leader, we got to balance accountability with empathy. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
the accountability is not clear. How do you do that? We always resort to empathy. So that's key for performance in any world. Right. So then the third thing we look at is trust. And we believe increasing trust, even in high performing teams, is the method of creating velocity without having to run faster and without having to work more hours. And then the last thing that I think is whatever you create culturally, that framework of people, process, and purpose, and they all have to be running at the same cylinder, there has to be a mechanism for making it sustainable that also provides for agility. Meaning, as soon as we put a plan together, it's going to change. And I tell people that ask me to talk about strategic planning is, write the first year in pen or maybe dark pencil, and the second year write in soft pencil. And the reason being is if you could tell me what's going to happen in 2 weeks, I think maybe then you could talk about what's going to happen in a year. And so I think those are the components, I think, is the recognition of your own leadership and acceptance and willing to develop and be humble. And I think the second is set up a culture, people, process, and structure that allows people to stretch, but also accepts the fact that we're going to fail. And this is a process. It's not a spiritual type of thing, there's a process.
Yeah, there's a nuts and bolts to this.
When I say,
yep.
Yeah. And when we say improving the world one leader at a time, there is a limbic side of that, right? The values. But there is very much a process side of that, which is if you don't have clear accountability, you're going to be going towards empathy, which doesn't drive organizational performance. If you could balance good accountability with what a leadership's supposed to provide, empathy, then you can really influence higher levels of performance.
Fantastic, John. I think if somebody were really listening to the conversation just now that we've had over the past 30 minutes, there are some real clean and clear nuggets that they can walk away with of what they can do to feel more grounded, more connected, and more purposeful. That they can see the impact of their efforts in life and in work. I can't thank you enough for taking the time to share some of your thoughts, some of your insights from your life, some of the high points, some of the lower points, and it's a continual journey, isn't it?
Yeah, and I'd say if anybody, my work has become my hobby, right? As I said, it's about life, and if anybody wants to learn more, you could certainly call me at 862-216-2425. look up LinkedIn. And most importantly, hopefully I'll see you this July. I mean, it's going to just be a terrific, terrific experience. But if anybody would like me to share more of my background and how Leadership Forum might apply to where they are in their professional and life, I'd be glad to have that conversation.
Thanks, John. And again, people can go to www.leadershipforum@silverbay.com, look at what the agenda is. They can sign up through that. They can call you. And I can't wait to go again this year. It's fantastic.
I can't wait to see you there, Rob.
Awesome. Thanks, John. I
We'll
really appreciate it.
Have to play some golf, maybe.
Yeah, that's it. I'm going to bring my sticks.
And you know how much I love golf.
Yeah.
Have a great day.
Thanks. Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.